Hi, everyone, for your time this afternoon, and also for your interest, really, to know more about the work that is being done out in the community to help those who have suffered impact due to the Windrush scandal. As Caroline said, this is a continuation of the event that we held last year with LawWorks last autumn, where I actually the panel, and we gave a brief background into the scheme, the scandal itself first of all, and why the Windrush scheme was formed to provide redress to those that have suffered loss as a result of the scandal. So for today, we are going to focus more on the outreach work that is being done in the community. There are many clinics, many who are doing this work, and even though the Home Office themselves have estimated about 15,000 people plus should be applying for the compensation through the scheme, only 4,016 people have actually applied so far since the scheme was launched 3 years ago. And out of the 4,000 people who have applied, only 37 people have actually received compensation. So it's very clear that there is many people out there who still need the help and support, and it's all about how can we reach them and how can we provide that support to them. So there are some of you who are just here to learn about what is being done, and maybe there are some of you who actually want to join the clinic or to join the work through partnership with maybe a clinic or a organization who is providing that support. And that's what we are going to be speaking about today. On the panel today, we have Anthony Browne from Windrush Defenders. He has just joined in the place of Glenda Andrew from Preston, Windrush, who couldn't join us last minute. We also have Subira Cameron-Goppy from Claudia Jones' organization, Bridget Tatham from Browne Jacobson, who actually volunteers at the Windrush Legal Advice Clinic in Wolverhampton. We're also joined by Nicola Burgess from the Greater Manchester Immigration Aid Unit, who I will now pass over to speak about the Wendy Williams Windrush Lessons Learned review, where we are at with this, and also the work that she's doing in the community, working alongside 8 law firms.
Hello, everyone. It's great to be with you all today, and thank you so much, Sibon, for that introduction and overview. As we just heard, I'm Nicola. I am a solicitor at GMIAU, and my caseload includes all aspects of immigration and asylum law, and I also supervise the Windrush Legal Initiative, which I'll talk more about shortly. So the topic for today, as we've just heard, is Windrush Revisited. So to set the scene, I first want to talk about the Wendy Williams Lessons Learned Review Progress Updates. So this was published in March this year, and this followed Wendy's original review commissioned in the wake of the scandal. This made 30 recommendations and called for deep cultural reform within the Home Office. The 30 recommendations boiled down to 3 key elements. 1, that the Home Office must acknowledge the wrong which has been done. 2, it must open itself up to greater external scrutiny. And 3, it must change its culture to recognise that migration and wider Home Office policy is about people, and whatever its objective, it should be rooted in humanity. The recommendations further fell into 4 broad categories: the department's interaction with the communities it serves, and with external stakeholders, which very much links into the community outreach we'll be talking about today, the department's interaction with its people, the department's role in wider government, and the department's approach to race, diversity, and inclusion. So the progress update followed an independent assessment in September last year, which reviewed the steps taken by the Home Office to implement these recommendations. I'm sure it will come as absolutely no surprise to anyone here today to discover that the Home Office was found very much lacking in its efforts. The progress report runs to 144 pages, and it's well worth a read as an introduction to the systemic flaws within the Home Office and the areas highlighted for reform. The review covers all aspects of the workings of the Home Office, but for today's purpose, I'm going to focus on what was said in respect of the Windrush compensation scheme. So the progress report really documented 5 key issues with the scheme. Firstly, as Sibon's just touched upon, and in fact these numbers are slightly more out of date because they link to January rather than the recent figures we just heard, but as of January 2022, there'd only been 3,490 claims compared to an original planning assumption of 15,000. So far few people than expected had actually applied under the scheme. The Home Office have so far failed to tease out the rationale behind this disparity. And so Wendy Williams recommended that this is remedied so the Home Office can be assured that it has done all that it can to identify those affected by the Windrush scandal and to make restitution to them. It was further highlighted that they must do everything possible to reach people in the Caribbean and beyond who might be entitled to similar support. Secondly, it raised concerns as to the consideration of individual cases. For example, sending repeated requests to claimants for information, delay, not updating claimants on the progress of their claims, lack of communication over long periods of time, and questions over the efficiency and effectiveness of quality assuring every casework decision. Thirdly, it raised concerns about various aspects of the operation of the scheme, such as the complexity of the application process itself. Again, the delays in claims being processed. One person told Wendy Williams they had been waiting 2 years for a decision on their application. Sadly, this type of time frame very much accords with my own experience in practice, so it's really not the exception. And it also highlighted a lack of empathy on the part of the decision makers. Further, concerns about the quality of the casework were highlighted. This was evidenced by the small sample of cases she reviewed, which showed that there are inconsistencies in the way that claims are considered and progressed. Again, this is something we see in practice, where very similar cases receive very different outcomes. Wendy Williams noted that this can affect the public's perception of the scheme, and ultimately it deters claimants from applying. And crucially, she found that it's important to ensure that the systems for regularising individual status and compensating them for the losses are supported by an outreach programme. In other words, the Home Office should be proactive in identifying potential members of the cohort, both through publicity and engagement, and encouraging them to apply under the relevant schemes. Tellingly, the claimant that Wendy Williams spoke to described the compensation scheme in the following terms. It's chaos, that's all that I can say. I don't think some of the staff from the helpline knew what the Windrush saga was all about. I gave up for 2 years. I've only just put in my claim. I became ill. I was stressed far too much by the process. A Home Office official she spoke to said, while the starting points for compensation have since been revised, our approach does not scream righting the wrongs or compassion, but how little can we get away with paying out? Forcing victims to go through a second fight for compensation after fighting for their statuses is a devastating insult. The findings from the progress review very much accord with my own knowledge of the scheme from practice and with the findings of a report by the organisation Justice entitled Reforming the Windrush Compensation Scheme. This was published in November last year. This made 27 recommendations as to how the scheme could be improved, including a call shared by many in the sector to remove the scheme from the Home Office to avoid the poacher-turned gamekeeper effect and to aid independence and accountability. to make available legal aid or other funding to ensure that claimants are supported in applying under the scheme, to raise awareness of the scheme, something that we all keep on going back to time and time again, and to improve the mechanisms of challenge to decisions made by the scheme. The call for legal aid to be made available to Windrush survivors was also echoed by the Home Affairs Select Committee, also in a report from the end of last year, in which they described a litany of flaws in the design and operation of the scheme. And to complete the picture, in March this year, there was a report from the independent person to the scheme, Martin Levermore. He observed structural weaknesses in the scheme and made several recommendations, including providing additional support and signposting to claimants to help facilitate the management of the quality of applications coming in and to afford protection to vulnerable claimants. So where does this leave the scheme now as of July this year? Despite the scandal becoming headline news as long ago as 2018, with the effect of successive hostile environment policies being felt long before, the government simply don't know how many people were actually impacted. We do know that of the anticipated number, far fewer applications for compensation have been submitted. In fact, only 7% have applied. So as Sibon said, there are so many people out there needing help to access the scheme. The likely reasons for the low take-up are mistrust of the Home Office as the party who caused the injustice, the fear of not being believed and not receiving the full award of compensation to which a person is entitled. The scheme is complex and it requires copious amounts of supporting evidence. This is despite the lowering of the burden of proof. This puts people off from applying and it causes significant delays in decision making. There is also a lack of free legal advice available to navigate all of this. And many people simply remain unaware of the scheme, unsure if it applies to them, or as already highlighted, they are deterred from applying. I now want to talk about the work that I'm doing at GMIAU as part of the Windrush Legal Initiative and the wider work of the Windrush Justice Clinic to try and overcome all of these obstacles. And you'll hear similar stories from Sibon and others on the call today. As of January this year, GMIAU have been working in partnership with 8 city law firms, Brian Cave, Leighton and Paisner, Charles Russell Speechleys, Debevoise and Plimpton, Deckert, Latham and Watkins, Linklaters, Taylor Wessing and White and Case, collectively known as the Windrush Legal Initiative. And it's good to see some of the volunteers on the call today. Our aim is to ensure that as many eligible claimants as possible are fully supported in applying for compensation under the scheme. All the work is conducted on a pro bono basis. We use a volunteer-based model, so the solicitors from the firms act as volunteers of our charity. GMIAU triage any inquiries to ensure the claimant is eligible to apply under the scheme, and if they are, then they're formally taken on as clients. All work is supervised by GMIAU, and the clients have the benefit of a team of volunteer lawyers from the individual firms. This normally consists of at least a partner, associate, and trainee. Through this model, the client gains the resources of a large international law firm, in addition to the immigration expertise of GMIAU. Without this model, we simply wouldn't be able to do this work, as legal aid is not automatically available for these types of cases. The legal aid agency routinely refused to grant exceptional case funding, that's the supposed safety net, as these claims are deemed to be straightforward, and they say that help is available through the Home Office or the We Are Digital scheme. We know in practice that these cases are in fact incredibly complex and time-consuming to prepare properly. They can take up to 50 hours of preparation, and in turn it takes the Home Office on average 154 hours to consider a claim. Our clients are fully supported through the whole process, which includes document gathering, obtaining expert evidence, helping the client tell their own story by way of a witness statement, completion of the very lengthy application form, the submission of the application with detailed legal representations and support, advice on the decision, and assistance with the review process if it's a negative outcome. We're also supported by forensic accountants from Ernst & Young. They are also assisting us on a pro bono basis to draw up schedules of loss reflecting the real life values, which are higher than the values derived from the Home Office's very prescriptive criteria. The aim of this is to accurately reflect what a person has lost over time. For example, in the loss of access to employment category, we would seek to recover for loss of promotion opportunities, inflation values, tax relief, pension, that kind of thing, everyday items which just aren't provided for in the rules of the scheme. We also work with a team of psychologists who undertake clinical assessments of our clients and provide medical legal reports to demonstrate the impact on a person's life of their inability to prove their lawful status. As well as this being incredibly helpful evidence for their claim, we find that clients at last, often after many years of disbelief, finally feel that they have been listened to. Subira will shortly talk to us in more detail about the importance of providing clients with holistic support. So the initiative is currently helping 31 clients with their claims under the scheme. And to give you a bit of a flavour of the work, we're supporting a number of claimants originally from the Caribbean, all of whom have resided in the UK since childhood. One particular client has written a blog about his experiences called "I've Gone Through Life Looking Over My Shoulder." This really sums up the fear shared by many of our clients. The blog is available on our website if anyone wants to have a read of a first-person account of the trauma caused. We're also helping an Egyptian national who was granted indefinitely to remain in 1981, but lost his job as a result of the hostile environment, as his employer refused to accept the indefinitely to remain stamp in his passport and demanded a biometric residence permit, which he didn't have and he couldn't afford. We're also helping a husband and wife from Zimbabwe who have lived in the UK since 1970. They have been denied compensation, and we are assisting with a review of the decision. The Home Office have incomplete records due to the passage of time, yet assert that their indefinitely to remain lapsed as they left the UK for 2 years or more. Our clients refute that assertion, and they've also provided employment and national insurance records which showed that they were in the UK at the relevant times. We're also helping a chap who was born in the UK in 1983, who, despite automatically acquiring British citizenship through his Commonwealth parents, who were settled in the UK at the time of his birth, he was only confirmed as British as a result of a scandal in 2018. He reports losing his sense of self-worth due to the Home Office disputing his right to citizenship over a 30-year period. And we're helping an Australian national who arrived in the UK in 1980 when she was just 11 months old, who, despite holding a right of abode, having been educated here and worked here, was detained by immigration and threatened with deportation. Our initiative helps clients across the country. We're not limited by location, and we're currently assisting people in London, Bristol, Sheffield, Luton, Manchester, and Ipswich. We found that when the initiative first launched, that the demand was much less than actually anticipated. So the initiative first partnered with JCWI when I was the legal director there, and when it launched in April last year, we did publicise it through national media, social media, and our relevant networks. Despite this, we struggled to fill our first 16 slots. Our aim was always to assist as many clients as possible, and so learning lessons from our initial pilot, we looked at ways we could increase our reach. In May this year, we were awarded funding from the Access to Justice Foundation to provide outreach and workshop sessions in the community in order to increase awareness of the scheme and the eligibility criteria. There's a relatively common misconception that it is just for those from the Caribbean or Commonwealth nationals, when the scope is actually much wider. It's important to remember that it covers anyone of any nationality who arrived in the UK before the 31st of December 1988, who is here lawfully or is now a British citizen, and who has experienced loss due to their inability to prove their lawful status. So with this funding, we've so far carried out a coffee morning with Afzal Khan MP in the Longsight area of Manchester, a solidarity event in Manchester city centre led by those with lived experience, coinciding with the Week of Action to mark 10 years since the introduction of the hostile environment, and awareness raising at the Windrush Day celebration in Hackney Central. That was alongside our partners from the Windrush Justice Clinic. We've also designed a leaflet explaining the compensation scheme and the help available to make a claim. We are aiming to share that as far and wide as possible So if there are any clinics or organisations who would like a copy, I'm very happy to forward that on. Our forthcoming projects include a display at the Whitworth Art Gallery in Manchester during the South Asian Heritage Month. And we have an agreement with the Lowry Theatre in Salford to host a social justice stall during one of their Windrush-inspired productions in October later this year. We're really trying to kind of think outside the box to ensure that the message is spread far and wide. Yes, the compensation scheme, it's complex and it's daunting, but those who have suffered injustice are entitled to compensation, and there is help available to navigate the system. We are very interested in hearing from and in working with others to raise awareness. That's why calls like this today are so important. And I also want to mention the work of the Windrush Justice Clinic, which is incredibly important in this respect too. So the clinic was founded in 2021 by North Kensington Law Centre, Southwark Law Centre, Westminster Uni, Claudia Jones organisation and others. This joined-up approach from community groups and legal advisors, supported by students, has been successful in securing compensation for individuals, in raising awareness of the scheme, in providing the holistic support, and at really keeping the issue on the public agenda. I think it is also important to keep the issue alive in the parliamentary sphere. There was a recent debate in Westminster Hall, tabled by Kate Ottmar MP, which shows that there is still the political appetite amongst some to keep up the pressure. Sadly, as we have seen from the recent passing of the Nationality and Borders Act and the Rwanda Agreement, in other quarters there's the appetite to double down on the limitation of rights while claiming that lessons have been learned from Windrush. At the debate, Diane Abbott MP described her recent visit to the compensation scheme team in Sheffield, where caseworkers confirmed to her that there are thousands of claims still not allocated to caseworkers for consideration. Like our client featured in our blog, many of them will be elderly, frail, and with health conditions, which mean that if there is delay in their claim, they may not live long enough to obtain the compensation to which they are entitled. This is shameful, and it's a far cry from righting the wrongs. So after listening to the speakers today, and you decide you want to help but don't know how best to use your skills, I would suggest that writing a letter to your MP is a good place to start. Let's keep the scandal and the need for redress on their ever-changing agenda. Points to potentially raise with your MP would include the need for the scheme to be removed from the Home Office to allow for accountability, the need for sufficient resources within the scheme to prevent delays and increase the speed and efficiency of decision-making, funding to be made available to all those accessing the scheme so they have the benefit of legal representation and access to expert evidence, awareness building, and a change to how losses are calculated to increase the value of awards, particularly with the loss of employment calculation. For those of you already working in clinics, even if you don't provide immigration advice, awareness of the scheme is important. For example, where a client has experienced problems in the past with housing or in accessing benefits, it's worth exploring whether this was due to their inability to prove their lawful status. If so, it's likely to only be a fraction of the losses that they've incurred and the start of the story as to how their life has actually been impacted. Do feel free to signpost or refer any clients to GMI AU, or if you'd like to discuss ways in which you could help with awareness raising, do get in touch. I will add my contact details to the chat. Thank you all for listening, and I will pass you over to Subira from the brilliant Claudia Jones organisation.
Thank you, Nicola. Thank you for that lovely introduction. And thank you, LawWorks, for inviting my organisation and myself to speak. I just want to introduce myself. My name is Subira Cameron-Goppy, and I'm the Windrush coordinator at Claudia Jones organisation. Claudia Jones is a charity, and we are a grassroots community charity, 40 years old this year, that intrinsically supports African and Caribbean women and their families. Outside of our Windrush services, we also offer family support services, our vulnerable women and girls services, as well as our educational and our support and after school services. back to our Windrush Justice support, we became attached with the Windrush Justice Clinic in 2020, and our role within the clinic is to offer emotional, psychological, and mental support to the victims, as well as we'd also triage and signpost directly to the legal advisors. Within this post, it is our most vital aspect is our volunteers. Our volunteers are vital to our delivery of our support package. Our volunteers are trained to triage, as well as to support our clients throughout their claim and even after. We found that this hand-holding service truly allows our clients to feel safe within the claim while they're in the service, and especially when disclosing. As what we've seen alongside the legal aspect of a case can take some time. Everything from gathering the evidence to putting in the claim, waiting for the evidence to come back. And from the moment of unpacking, from the moment of reaching out, the clients have started to unpack their own trauma. Now, with that, within our organization, we focus on supporting them holistically within that. So we offer other psychological support services, such as counseling and group work, such as our thinking spaces. And we find that even though sometimes the clients just utilize their volunteers as that psychological aid and support, knowing that they have that support is really beneficial for our clients. And we find that our clients tell us that they find it very beneficial as well. We are, with supporting our clients and with our role and being a grassroots community organization, much of my role has been in outreach, in not just accessing the clients directly, but specifically also accessing other community organizations and groups which access our audience. So we are based within Hackney, and we had a widespread our own Windrush generation service that we was delivering, which is one of the reasons why we were chosen to partner within the Windrush Justice Clinic. With that, we are open to collaboration, and we focus on our outreach delivery. And our focus on our outreach delivery is with partnering with grassroots organizations. So we've been delivering specifically in areas outside of our own. So in South London, further north, West London, Northwest London, and our client base is much further. So we've had requests from outside of London as well as inside of London. We've also recently extended our outreach to some international community partners via CARICOM UK, and they've introduced us to some international, the international faction CARICOM. However, with funding limitations within our clinic itself, as well as us being a charity, we're mindful about extending our promotional reach, as we wish to ensure that we can support the potential influx expected. And that's a very important aspect for us within the clinic, is funding and making sure that we have the support aspect because if we, for example, have a certain amount of volunteers, we have our certain amount of volunteers which can manage a certain amount of cases. And with that, we always are asking people to recruiting for further volunteers to come in and support. We've had one of our volunteers is a solicitor, and so she's trained in and supported with the Windrush cases from a legal aspect, and she aids with our training of further volunteers, so we know how to effectively triage. Also, our psychological support services facilitators train our volunteers to be able to manage the psychological and mental and emotional stuff that our clients are going through. And we also offer psychological clinical support for our volunteers, because they have to unpack a lot. There's a lot of that's then put onto them. And with I always go back to our volunteers, because our volunteers are very vital in this, is because the clients don't often get to speak to their legal solicitors. And I'm sure some of our legal, Nicola and Sibon, who we've worked with, your clients will constantly contact you because they want information. And a lot of them, they haven't had much experience within any form of legal experience. So they don't understand the length of time it might take to get information requests and to gather information. And it's the volunteers that really talk them through this process, that make allow them to be the safe guiding boards throughout this process. And it's a very proud aspect for myself as supporting them and to making sure. But with this, it has its limitations, and we really do, especially when we are completely independent from the Home Office. So for example, in regards to certain aspects of like funding, we are mindful of gathering funding from the Home Office, because then are we completely independent? And these are some of the limitations that we have to come across, especially when you're looking at outreach. We are open to collaboration, and we like to signpost our clients also to further support services that we wouldn't be able to support. And we also signpost within the clinic. So for example, if any of our other partners wish to signpost one of their clients to us for psychological support, we offer that service within the Windrush Justice Clinic. With that, I think that's me and that's time. And there's definitely a lot that I can unpack in regards to my experience as the Windrush Justice Coordinator within the charity and within the actual clinic. And I'm happy to take questions, and feel free when it is to ask me questions in the end. But for now, I would like to pass on to our colleague, Bridget Tatham, who's going to be discussing further aspects of what, as a commercial lawyer, what she does and how she volunteers her time and her services.
Thank you, Subira, for that introduction. And thank you to Nicola as well, because that oversight and that insight in terms of your experience is absolutely helpful. And I think that's the beauty of these panel sessions, is that you pick up information. Because I'm Bridget Tatham, I'm a partner in a commercial law firm. I actually specialise in insurance work, but for corporate clients. And that aspect is quite useful, as I'll come to, in terms of how I help and volunteer at the Windrush Legal Advice Clinic. Just stepping back a bit, I'd like to do a couple of things. One, just to encourage people who are at the start of thinking about setting up a clinic or becoming involved in a clinic, is just to talk a bit about how the Windrush Legal Advice Clinic came about. I also want to tip into the work that we're doing by partnering, and how important partnering is with particular local organisations as well. It's not because we are local. As Subira said, some of our referrals come from, far and abroad, but I'll come back to that. And then finally, just talk about this piece around funding and the constraints about some of that being badged with, the Home Office and what that difficulty and how that can present some difficulties. So just taking it back to the beginning, we are relatively new. The Windrush Legal Advice Clinic has been up and running, I think, Sibon, you were at the first meeting, I think, just before lockdown, back end of 2019, and obviously all geared up. I reached out to Patrick Vernon, who is a patron of a charity that I chair, and said, well, what are we doing about Windrush? And he said, well, actually, I'm glad you've mentioned that, because I'm already speaking to somebody called Maureen Mitchell, who's a lawyer in the area. And they together co-founded the Windrush Legal Advice Clinic. I was quite keen to get on board, so I do volunteer, but I'm also a director because, and this is the beauty of having somebody like Patrick on board, with his advice about the status in order to try and get funding. He said that you needed to be CIC status, so you needed directors. So I'm a director along with Maureen Mitchell, Patrick Vernon, and Maurice Malcolm. He's got one of those names that you could say either way, can't you? We're all bar Patrick lawyers, and that has been very useful. Maurice is a criminal lawyer, so in terms of that, you know, the detail and the analytical basis, that's fantastic. And I said, with my background in terms of catastrophic injury, I'm used to applying that forensic analysis to cases that come through. In terms of outreach and getting the West Midlands and the Black Country to know that we exist, because that's, as Nicola was saying and Sibon was saying as well, is the real issue here. We have kind of evolved through lockdown, because obviously lockdown, nobody could go out, you couldn't do your info sessions, and the people that the demographic that we're trying to engage with invariably won't have Teams or Zoom that you can tap into. They want to see people, they want you on their doorstep. So we went about that by lodging an advert with LawWorks, and we got some response to that, but not much. That's sort of criticism of LawWorks. I think that's just about the level of awareness out there to get volunteers to come and help us. So we had this small little band of people, quite local, quite geared up to actually get out and do stuff, to get out and flyer the West Indian and Caribbean shops in the local community, to make contacts with the GP surgeries and put flyers up as well in that. We also targeted local communities who cater for that demographic as well. And quite interestingly, we had very little take up. Most of our referrals have come from word of mouth outside of the area. So all that effort and all that spend on some really snazzy marketing is, we just sort of scrap that. We need to think of something else. So that has evolved in terms of our outreach to, well, what can we do and who should we be working with? And that's also from learning lessons from the likes of Sibon, who's been doing it a lot longer than us, and targeting specific communities. So one of the specific areas that we have targeted now is the community of churches, who have given us a platform which is quite interesting, because churches, you'd think, are quite apolitical, but they want to help their congregation and support their congregations. And so we have a platform now whereby we can go and do, and we'll steal Sibon's title of info clinics, because it's brilliant, and go and speak to the congregations. And that has actually been quite effective in terms of at least raising awareness. That still hasn't quite translated into applicants through the door. So we need to do more. So it's about repeat and making people feel safe that they can come to us. So we also decided, well, we need partners who have got a bigger presence and a bigger reach. So we thought, well, who could we be working with? And also tapping into that piece around getting volunteers to do some triage. And this is because we thought this, once we started speaking, we'd be inundated. The four of us would not be able to cope with what was going on in Wolverhampton and the West Midlands. So we needed to partner with a law clinic. And clearly, being in Wolverhampton, we approached Wolverhampton University, who have actually been quite phenomenal. And I will name check Beverly Rizzola, who's the head of the law clinic and one of the lecturers there, who pulled together some really keen students who Sibon did some online training for us last year. And they are based in the Manda Centre, and that was again key because it was about footfall, ease of access, and have one of our pop-ups to get people to come through the door. So we're still getting people come through the door, but Nicola, is that actually translating into claims? Not necessarily so. We're still getting claims by word of mouth as opposed to our info clinic. So that, I think, represents that degree of not quite trusting, not us, but just trusting the process. So it's because a friend has said a recommendation, or because it's Patrick Vernon has made a recommendation, that somebody will actually be encouraged and feel safe enough to say, I need help. Or invariably, they've already put in their application because they've been sort of persuaded that a 44-page application document is easy, and they've been knocked back. So will then come to us to help them to revisit why they've been knocked back by the Home Office. They don't understand why their claim for, loss of home, loss of income, anxiety has not been successful. So it's been quite interesting looking at the categories of applicants and victims that we get through. It's either referral from out the area, or it's people who've been knocked back as well. So, but that's not all doom and gloom. We do actually have some really great examples of people who have, who with hand-holding can put forward a valid claim and a supportive claim. And I think that's it. So instead of people putting their applications in and then getting knocked back, it's about, hang on, let's pull together your story, let's pull together your evidence, and then complete the form together. Now, that might delay the application going in to begin with, but the aim is to, as I say to my clients, it's about being upfront, doing a lot of front-footed work to put your case in the best position possible before you present the actual claim itself. And that's a conversation with those victims, because they are concerned, they're worried, they are actually in destitution, some of them. So it's about them trusting you with your expertise as a lawyer, in this instance, to slow the process down a bit, which is counterintuitive, isn't it? But to slow it down, to evidence gather, to get the evidence in from your employers or your GP, so you can piece together the information on their behalf. But one of the, so that's just the difficulties that you can face, but also the way in which I personally approach some of the claims that I'm handling. But just turning it and looking at that piece around partnering. Yes, we've got some foot soldiers on the ground in terms of the really keen university students. And they're not just doing this because they want to put it on their CV. They're genuinely, passionately interested in helping and triaging potential applicants. But it's that piece about building a relationship with an organisation. So that has presented funding opportunities for us. And we were successful with a joint application with the university through Voices for Change earlier this year. And that was about awareness. It was an awareness programme. And this kind of fitted what we needed to do strategically. What steps could we take to raise awareness of our service? And not just our service, but the service, scheme, the compensation scheme more broadly, so that people actually felt encouraged and felt safe enough to make an approach. And that's funding is only, as I said, has been awarded, effective from the 1st of March. And it takes some time when you're working with a partner to make sure that things are representative of what we need, as well as what they need. So we're working in conjunction with their art department. I'm not producing the artwork because I'm not an artist, but we have interviewed some phenomenal artists who are now designing some pieces of work. We've commissioned pieces of work to support the Windrush compensation and the awareness around it, which will be coming out later this year. And it's an interesting process. And the reason why I raise it is because funding is key, because we are all volunteers and we are also a pro bono organisation. We take no payment. But funding itself, if you're not really careful, you've got to be badged with the Home Office, could actually be a deterrent. And your point, Subira, what you need to do is then go back through the funding application and the funding award to see what terms are set by those funders, which I have done, because on some of our posters, the university quite properly And you can see why they want to do it, quite probably want to raise their profile, working with the Home Office, Voices for Change, and put that on the poster. But I've gone back through the funding agreement, and actually all we need to do is co-badge with the university on all our promos. So I can legitimately push back and say, yes, we've got the money, but it's all I need to do is have the University of Wolverhampton's logo and also Windrush Legal Advice Clinic's logo on all our literature, where the work is for this particular awareness scheme. So that's just one thing. Don't accept, that you have to have Home Office, because the Home Office, you would hope, would know that nobody trusts them. So if they want people to come forward, the best way forward to stop that is by putting your stamp all over funding stream and funding, etc. So that's just lessons learned. So what else are we doing on the ground in terms of outreach? We are doing what everybody else is doing. We are going out now that we can. So we've attended local festivals with our pop-ups and our flyers. We are actually having a launch scheme at one of our local centres called the Heritage Centre, and we'll have Sandra Williams, who's the Mayor of Wolverhampton, attend and open that for us. And she is a stalwart of the Black community here, so she is somebody who's going to be trusted. We're working with the African Caribbean Community Initiative as well, which is a mental health charity based in Wolverhampton. And again, that's where some of our referrals come through to us. But equally, Patrick, because of his profile, has been approached about how we can look at the effects of and report more scientifically, I suppose, and systematically on the impact of the Windrush scandal on the victims. So it's about profile raising for the Windrush compensation, with a call out for victims to trust the people who are trying to help them. So yeah, on that note, I don't know if I just gabbled on, but I just thought that the funding aspect was quite interesting, and my role as a volunteer, which I do very much side of desk, as do all volunteers, I'm sure. On which note, I will hand back to Sibon.
Cheers, Bridget. So I'm just going to speak very briefly in regards to the outreach that we do. So we've been running info sessions for about 3 years now. What I would say is that when we first started the work, it was in partnership with the Nottinghamshire Windrush Forum at the Pilgrim Church. So they reached out to us for us to help them support claimants with their application, and that was at a church, and that's where most of our claimants came from in Nottingham, who we helped. And then we started to hold our sessions in London at the Barbados High Commissions. We've also held our clinics and info sessions at African Caribbean Organization centres and other spaces where we can see the cohort in who we are trying to reach. They access those kind of places. So our outreach work up until recently was very targeted at certain groups, hence why most of our claimants have been from a Caribbean background, so from Jamaica, Barbados, St. Lucia, Trinidad, Aruba, Guyana. But through what I would say is through the triaging of the clinics and through the info sessions itself in the community, we have triaged over 47 people, and that was just through the community outreach that we did. But obviously during lockdown, many came through Google, search, or through social media. We really used our social media platforms to showcase our work and reach out to the cohort. And we actually did see a lot of results. And since we started the work 3 years ago, so we have triaged 164 people. Out of those, 65 of those we have actually helped with the process of applying to the scheme. And out of those, so far, 22 have been successful with their application and their claims. So you can, see there's still many who are waiting, for their claims to be concluded. And what was raised earlier was the length of time. So we've got a claimant who he's been waiting 3 years, and he was one of the first ones I ever did. And up until today, we've not got a conclusion on his case yet. So some of them are really taking a long time, but there are those that we have seen just from sending off the claim form, within 4 months they got an offer. So it does vary, and we're not sure why, but we have seen that. So aside from Caribbean nationals that we help, we also have claimants from African Caribbean countries, such as in Ghana, Kenya, Uganda, and also claimants from Australia, Canada, Iran, even Pakistan. And we've seen that through the social media aspect, that's when we get a lot more from communities or from countries that we may not have reached out to in the community. And what I like is through our partnership with Reading Windrush Alliance, so we've been holding our info sessions with them since March, and in June we held a Windrush info session at the shopping centre. And that's not really a normal place that we would hold a clinic, a info session, but they did have that idea. It actually worked because through that we are helping 3 claimants, and these are people that may have never come through a church door, or maybe who would have never accessed an African Caribbean centre, but as they were walking by and they saw the banner and they reached out to one of our volunteers and they were triaged. They actually do have quite a good claim. And even just last week, Saturday, when I was in Reading, we held a info session there, and there was a young man, similar my age, who has gone through a lot of injustice. And through speaking to him, the volunteer solicitors who sat with him, and when I was going through the notes, I said, wait a minute, his father's name sounds like somebody that I know, but he's not spoken to his father for many years. He's not in contact. It's a long story. And then when I actually saw, I thought, oh my gosh, we're actually helping his father since last year, but they've not been in contact, and he has lost all of his documents because obviously since childhood. So it was through that we are uniting families that have been separated due to the scandal and due to what has occurred. So outreach work brings about these results. It brings about these opportunities that we meet people that we may have never met before. And so I can say that the info sessions, yes, there are many that do come along. So for example, in Reading in March, when we launched the work with the Windrush Alliance group, over 70 people came along to that first info session, but out of that, only 10% were actually triaged, and a few of them we can see they do have a claim and do need support. So it's not a huge number to who we fought, but one of them who came along in March at our last session 2 weeks ago, she brought her brother from Oxford. So he traveled to another city. So those seeds are being sown. So sometimes you might not get the result, straight away. You might think, oh, so many came along, but only a few. But at least those seeds are being sown. The word is out, and like what Bridget said, word of mouth. A lot of our claimants have come through word of mouth, either from those who we are helping, then tell their friends or their neighbors, or sometimes some, for example, like we are helping a whole family just because somebody saw on a WhatsApp, somebody shared one of our posters on a WhatsApp, and then she sent that to her friend. Oh, I think you might need help from them. So there are different ways of reaching out to the community, and that's what we're learning, is that there are different avenues, and as we try and explore more and more, we can reach more people, but also working alongside these community groups who are on the ground, who actually speak with the cohort every day. The only reason why the work that we do has grown and has been successful is through partnering with the community organizations, with the churches, with the high commissions, with those who have access to the cohort. And I think that's just what I want to really speak about, is working alongside them. I have learned that sometimes people aren't going to come to us just because we say that we are there. Sometimes we have to go to them, and if it means holding an info session in spaces where they access, that's what we're happy to do, because our aim is to get the word out and also to help as many claimants as we can. But I'm not going to speak anymore because I can see time is running out, so I'm just going to pass over to Anthony Browne for him to speak about what his organization are doing and have been doing for several years in the community.
Thank you, Sibon. I'm actually going to add in Preston Windrush generation and descendants as well, because I'm here also to represent Glenda Andrew, who is the co-founder of Preston Windrush Generation and Descendants. So I'm the chair of Preston Windrush Generation and Descendants, and we perform various activities in the community. So initially it was about Sakina, the co-founder, who her daughter was told she wasn't British when she wanted to get a passport to go on a school trip. And it was quite a shock for her. And she found out that because her grandmother had come from St. Vincent in the 60s, and St. Vincent had got its independence in 79, I think it was, and hadn't realized that she wasn't British anymore. Then her daughter Sakina was born here. And although she was born here, she wasn't automatically British either, because she was born after 1983. And then her daughter wasn't British either. So this was quite a shock to the family. And they all had to go through the Windrush scheme. And there wasn't really the support mechanism in Preston. So they came over to Manchester, where I had organized a group called Windrush Defenders. And we were providing surgeries, and people from the Northwest and Greater Manchester were coming, and we were assisting them. So Glenda came along to that and asked me to be the chairman of Preston Windrush, and so we from Windrush Defenders started doing surgeries in Preston as well, and then we had the lockdown, and Glenda mobilised people to support the seniors with delivering a meal, Caribbean meal. So we called it the community response, and so that got the attention of the local council, who gave support. We've also started a platform called Free Talk, where people come along and share experiences and get support for some of the trauma that they've been through, or just sharing information about the work. Personally, I was impacted by the Windrush scandal. So I came here as a child, but again, my father came as a citizen of the United Kingdom and colonies, but when Jamaica got its independence, his citizenship was taken away, and that affected me. So I went back to Jamaica, came back to the UK, but had been out of the country for more than 2 years and fell foul of the 1971 Immigration Act, which said you'd lose your indefinite leave to remain or your residency if you'd been out of the country. But that wasn't actually true. Commonwealth citizens were protected, but that didn't stop the Home Office threatening me with deportation when I wanted to go to uni. And of course, that is quite shocking. And you lose yourself, your sense of belonging. You're frightened. You think you're never going to see your family again, and it just disorientates you. And it took about 10 years to sort all that out, or sort yourself out, and then roll on another 40 years, and here were people on the television being threatened with deportation, or actually being deported, losing their jobs, can't access the NHS with the hostile environment legislation of the 2014 Immigration Act. So there were people like others around the country organising events in the community, and I went along to that. One of them in Moss Side in Manchester, and spoke about my own experience. And I just at the time graduated with a law degree from the Open University, because I decided to get it out of my system. I hadn't gone to uni when I wanted to, but then I did, and I decided to get people together who I'd met on the university course. I'd also done an article in the paper asking for people with legal skills to come forward, and some people responded, and we formed a group, Windrush Defenders Legal Community Interest Company, and we started to help people with their status claims, and then eventually, when the compensation scheme came in, the compensation claims. But having experienced the situation myself, the government had, through Martin Ford QC, consulted on how people wanted to be compensated. So I'd given this great thought, and when the scheme came forward, it really didn't do the sort of things that I had put forward myself in the compensation. So I had a completely different perspective of what Martin Ford had. My view was, if someone wrongs you, it's for you to say how they've wronged you, and they should then apologize, and they should then repair that wrong. It's not for them to say to you how they're going to do it. And what the government's been doing is they put in place a scheme that says, this is how we think we've wronged you, and this is what we're going to pay you. Well, in my mind, damages are to put a person back in the position that they would have been in had they not been wronged. And the position that I would have been in is that I would have been a British citizen if they hadn't taken my dad's citizenship. And so for me, and for many other people, the wrong that the government did was taking people's citizenship without notice. And that's not really discussed that much. And I wanted to make the government account for that. So with the support of others, I think actually we did get some support from Nicola at JCWI in terms of some of the advice that was given, but with the support of Charles Russell Speechless working pro bono with us, we were able to make an application to the courts for additional review of the Windrush scheme and the Windrush compensation scheme because we felt that they weren't fit for purpose. We felt that when someone takes your citizenship, it's such an important part of your identity. It's difficult to quantify compensation for that, and the government aren't even offering compensation for that. So we were saying that there should be reparations when it's a situation where your citizenship has been taken in a discriminatory way because the arrangements that were made for people who had been invited here weren't that effective, and they had ceased in 1988 with the repeal of Section 7 of the British Nationality Act, where people could register. And we felt that there needed to be changes in the law because that was where the wrong began. And it's not the Home Office that makes the law, it's Parliament, which is really what the courts decided. The judge decided that he wouldn't give us permission because what we were asking for, only Parliament could do because it was primary legislation. And if we went down the road of judicial review, I was going to end up with like £50,000 worth of costs. And the judge wasn't going to do anything to upend primary legislation. So we got our judgment in effect because we spent all day analysing the situation, and he sent us off to Parliament, really. And so that's where our work is going at the moment, to lobby Parliament to change the legislation, to pay reparations, to apologise, because we hear politicians apologising, but they're here today and gone tomorrow. And it's actually Parliament that made the law, so Parliament needs to apologise, and Parliament doesn't speak until it legislates. So in my mind, we need to have a Windrush Act where Parliament apologises for the wrongs that they've done to the Windrush generation and then pays reparations, but also protects future generations by tackling race disparities in 5 themes. So we've identified 5 themes: community cohesion, criminal justice, education, health, and work. The race disparity figures are there on the government's website. And we identify that as the harm that Wendy Williams talks about in recommendation 1 of the Windrush Lessons Learned review. She talks about the harm that's been done to the African Caribbean community. And we're saying, well, how are you going to repair that harm? What is that harm? So we're saying that this is the harm that's been happening because of the way the laws have been framed. It came out of a period of racism in government, and that didn't only affect immigration laws. We had people being designated as educationally subnormal. We've seen what's happening in the criminal justice system. It all comes from that mindset where Black people are treated differently. And so if we're going to really talk about rights and the wrongs of the society, that's where we need to start. We need to start with the laws, and then we'll be able to address the statuses, and then we will find that the culture will change with regards to the compensation scheme, and more people will get to collect their compensation. So that's the work that Windrush Defenders are doing, and we are making plans for a year-long program to look at how we can create a coalition that can support us on that mission, how we can look at the various policy changes that we've identified in the areas that will change the fortunes of the Black community. And I say the Black community, but in particular the African Caribbean community, because in terms of the statistics, that's where it's dire. If you look at the educational statistics, only 3.5% of African Caribbeans achieve 3 A levels, whereas for white British it's 11%, Asian 17%, Chinese 25%. So they might talk about BAME, but a lot of the other racial groups are doing a lot better than the African Caribbean. So there seems to be some sort of legacy that's left, and we're finding that some of the trauma that's been experienced in enslavement is still manifesting itself in our community in the UK, and we feel that the government needs to start to look at these statistics and see how that can be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for their contributions. I'm afraid I'm going to have to bring it to a close here, given time. But do continue any conversation off the back of this, any more questions you might have on the forum. Anne-Marie has kindly put the link in the chat. But a really, really big thank you to our speakers for their incredibly interesting contributions. And like I said at the beginning, we will be collating all the links and resources onto the forum. Do continue to talk there, or contact details you'll be able to find there as well. Thank you to the speakers, and thank you all very much for joining us for over an hour and a half this afternoon. And we do hope to see you at our next session, which will be on co-production on the 23rd of August. Thank you.